Hey everybody, Jim here, welcome back to Mad Panic Gaming, where today fists and fireballs will fly because we're taking a look at a big bunch of fighting games on the original Sony PlayStation. Aside from the arcade, of course, this was my go-to machine for fighting games in the late 90s. And you could argue that the Sega Saturn was a much better console for fighting games, which in hindsight is debatable. But I never so much as played a Sega Saturn at the time, so that was a moot point to me. But regardless of which console you prefer, you can't argue that the PS1 didn't have a killer lineup of fighters, both of the 2D and 3D varieties, some of which are still to this day among my favorite fighting games ever made. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what I think are the 8 best fighters on the PS1.
Round 1. Fight!
Let's get started with the first of a handful of Capcom games, and one of my personal favorite 2D fighters ever, and that's Street Fighter Alpha 3, which combines the best of everything the Street Fighter series had to offer up to that point, with a huge roster of characters, fantastic graphics and sound, and gameplay that was super smooth and offered up a ton of variety. You start out with a whopping 31 playable characters that represent pretty much every kind of fighting archetype, and there are a few more secret unlockable characters to uncover. And for each one, you have 3 different fighting styles or isms to choose from that alter their movesets a bit and switch up the super combo gauge, with the A and X isms allowing you to perform some devastating super combos, and the V ism allowing for custom combos, which is a bit trickier to get the hang of, but once you've got it figured out, you'll be draining half of your opponent's life gauge in no time. So this is a game with a ton of depth, and more importantly, it's just plain fun. I can't tell you how many nights I stayed up with my friends back in the day playing match after match of Alpha 3, and almost 30 years later I've still never gotten burnt out on it. And as if that wasn't enough, Alpha 3 also features a bunch of different gameplay modes, some of which have to be unlocked by clearing the arcade mode or meeting certain other criteria. And these modes include Team Battle, a very cool 2-on-1 dramatic battle mode, and best of all, a World Tour mode where you're given a big bunch of challenges to complete in order to level up a character of your choice, granting them an assortment of nifty abilities that you can then take into matches against your friends. And these challenges include everything from defeating multiple opponents at once, to taking on opponents that can't be harmed by individual strikes, meaning you'll have to rely exclusively on combos to take them down. It's a really fun mode that I've sunk a ton of time into, and if you have a Pocket Station and the Japanese version of the game, you could actually take your characters with you like little Street Fighter Tamagotchi and level them up with minigames, which I've also spent more time doing than I'd care to admit. So in terms of gameplay, Alpha 3 has it all, plus visually, the Alpha series has always been my favorite version of Street Fighter, with some great character designs and a variety of colorful and very detailed backgrounds. The vibrant anime art style of late 90s Capcom is at its peak here. And this is also one of the all-time great fighting game soundtracks, with lots of memorable stage themes all throughout, that admittedly maybe aren't quite as impactful as some of the tunes from Street Fighter 2 or even Alpha 2, but it's still some fantastic music, making Alpha 3 the total package of amazing gameplay, visuals, and sound design, which is why it's still perhaps my favorite 2D fighter to this day, and certainly one of the best fighting games you can play on the PS1. Next up, another Capcom classic, and another one of my personal favorite 2D fighters, and that's Darkstalkers 3, or as it's known in Japan, Vampire Savior EX Edition, implying that certain changes were made from the arcade version, which is certainly the case, as the PS1 version features every character from the series, where the arcade version, or more accurately versions if you include Vampire Savior 2 and Vampire Hunter 2, all omitted certain characters from their rosters. And this version also adds an additional option for your Dark Force ability, a new feature to Vampire Savior that allows each character to access enhanced special powers for a limited period of time by using one of their super combo gauges. But here you can also select a Dark Force power mode, which is even more powerful and inflicts additional unrecoverable damage, but sacrifices 2 gauges to execute. You start out with 18 characters to choose from, with a few more to unlock, and Darkstalkers features what had to, at the time, be the wildest assortment of characters in any fighting game. It's cool enough that they're based on famous movie monsters and other creatures from various different folklore, but each of them has such a unique assortment of attacks and special abilities, which ensures that no 2 characters play alike. There are fast characters, power characters, and then there are those that are just downright weird and really tricky to play with. But once you've got them figured out, they offer up a lot of gameplay possibilities, and they're just damn fun to use. I've never considered myself to be a very good fighting game player, but Darkstalkers 3 has a basic combo system that's fairly simple to get the hang of, and the super combos are a cinch to pull off. So even if you're not great at fighters, Darkstalkers 3 is very approachable. Also, I like that it eschews the traditional round system and instead has you fighting one long continuous battle, similar to the system used in Killer Instinct. It eliminates breaks in the action, and even if you're winning, it really keeps you on your toes. Can't exactly take it easy when your health hasn't had a chance to recover. So the various mechanics and playstyles here are all great, but at its core, Darkstalkers 3 is just a very fun and approachable fighting game that, again, I've still never gotten burnt out on all these years later, and it features some truly outstanding graphics and sound. In terms of character designs, these are some of my favorite characters from any video game series. They each have a very distinct look and personality, being an odd but intriguing mix of cute on the one hand and horrific on the other. And the overall vibe and art direction of Darkstalkers is something you just can't find anywhere else. And the music is simply awesome, going for a smooth, sort of jazzy vibe for the most part, but sometimes hitting you with some very melancholy tracks that you almost never hear in a fighting game, but are oddly fitting here, with the credit roll track being one of my personal favorites. Anyway, whether it's the visuals, sound, or gameplay, Darkstalkers is an A+ game in every regard. It's one hell of a good time. Next up, another top-notch Capcom entry and a game that I always thought was a bit underrated. And that's the ever-so-awesome Rival Schools United by Fate, which I can remember picking up from a Walmart bargain bin, not even knowing what it was. All I knew was that it was made by Capcom, which to me was a seal of quality, and astonishingly it was only $10 brand new. And damn did I get a lot for that $10, as the PS1 port was a 2-disc game, with the first disc containing the original arcade version of Rival Schools, and the second being called the Evolution Disc, which features a whole load of additional gameplay modes, including a bunch of fun unlockable minigames. At its core, Rival Schools plays like a fast-paced 2D fighter, even though this is technically a 3D fighter. But aside from the graphics and the ability to sidestep, it plays a lot more like a Street Fighter game than Tekken, for example. You have a huge roster of characters to choose from representing their respective high schools, and you can pick 2 at a time. Though this isn't a tag fighter really, but instead you can call in your partners to perform some team attacks and swap back and forth between rounds. And speed is the name of the game with this one. Racking up combos, performing what the game calls tardy counters, and filling up your super combo meter as quickly as possible, which goes all the way up to 9 stocks. And by default, you can perform super combos with a single button press, and team attacks by pressing punch and kick buttons simultaneously. So if you're the kind of person that struggles with long button commands in fighting games, Rival Schools would be perfect for you, as it's the very definition of simple pick up and play action, and it is so damn satisfying. The gameplay is super smooth and there's a wide variety of characters to choose from, with some of them being more or less typical Shoto style characters like Batsu or my personal favorite, middle-aged teacher and brutal martial arts master Hideo, while others are a bit more oddball, using unorthodox fighting styles and even sports equipment to put the hurt on their opponents. But no matter who you pick, they're all a lot of fun to play as. And like I said, if you're getting tired of the basic arcade and versus modes, there are more, like League Mode, Tournament, Cooperative Play, unlockable minigames, and if you're playing the Japanese version, there's even a rather deep character creation mode. So for $10, Rival Schools kept me playing for a good long while and eventually became one of my favorite fighters and one of my favorite Capcom properties. And as you can see, the visuals are super vibrant and colorful, and this game moves at a very brisk pace, only occasionally slowing down when the screen is especially active. Also, I know I'm sounding like a bit of a broken record, but Rival Schools features another one of my all-time favorite video game OSTs, featuring a lot of high energy and super catchy tunes. And who could ever forget that epic opening cinematic that I just can't ever bring myself to skip. So from top to bottom, Rival Schools has everything I look for in a great fighting game. And in my opinion, it's one of the best not only on the PS1, but of the entire console generation. Next up, one more Capcom game, and that's Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha, which technically isn't really a Capcom game as they only published it, and it was developed instead by Adika. But Adika was founded by former Capcom developers Akira Nishitani and Akira Yasuda, who together developed games like Final Fight and Street Fighter 2. So yeah, it's more like a homecoming than anything else. And when you play this game, you can definitely tell it was developed by the guys originally responsible for Street Fighter 2, because it plays pretty much like most other games in the series, which is to say that the gameplay is very fun and easy to get into, but also features a considerable level of depth for anyone who's looking for it. EX features the same control scheme as any other Street Fighter game and features a ton of characters that you'll recognize from the series, and all of their special attacks and super combos are intact. But EX also introduced a whole bunch of brand new characters created by the staff at Adika, who would eventually branch off into their own series called Fighting Layer. So in a roundabout way, I guess you could call this game Capcom vs. Adika. And some of these new characters like Alan Schneider and Skullomania have been favorites of mine for a long time. They even threw in Dalsim and Sakura as console exclusive characters, as neither of them was featured in the two preceding arcade games. Similar to Rival Schools, EX Plus Alpha, while technically being a 3D fighter, plays more or less like a 2D fighter with some basic 3D elements, like some characters being able to sidestep. But if you've played pretty much any other 2D fighters, then you should feel right at home here. Some cool new abilities include the Guard Break, which uses a super combo gauge and not only breaks through your opponent's guard, but also stuns them, leaving them open for some serious punishment. Also, you can cancel normal attacks into special attacks, which at this point was pretty standard, but here you can also perform super cancels, chaining one super combo into another up to 3 times. And if you can time it right, you can deal out some crazy combos, which needless to say not only looks really cool, but are also very satisfying to pull off. But they do take a bit of practice. Anyway, with a huge variety of characters, both old and new, some solid fighting mechanics, and a bunch of gameplay modes including Team Battle, Survival, and Time Attack, Street Fighter EX Plus Alpha has pretty much everything you could ask for in terms of gameplay. The visuals are also pretty good. This definitely looks like a PS1 game from 1997, but it's colorful, the character designs are great, and the stages also look really nice. Again, it's like Rival Schools in that the environment is in 3D, but you're fighting on an infinite plane. And the soundtrack here is fantastic. Instead of recycling old Street Fighter music, everything here is original. And again, some of these tracks, like Guile and Sakura's stage themes, have become some of my all-time favorites. So in short, Adika really knocked it out of the park with this one. EX Plus Alpha looks, sounds, and plays great, and it's another highlight of the PS1's fighting library. Next up, an old favorite of mine and an installment in a series that I would love to see make a comeback. And that's Bloody Roar 2: The New Breed from 1999, which was published by Hudson Soft but was in fact originally developed by Rising, which kinda blows my mind that one of the greatest developers of shoot-em-ups also made one of my favorite fighters ever. And if you've never played a Bloody Roar game, then you are in for a real treat. And while the first game was awesome in its own right, the second game, as is typical of fighters, just did everything bigger and better. You start out with 9 playable characters in the arcade mode and 10 in the versus mode, and the main gimmick to the gameplay is that each character has both a human form and a beast form. During battle, as you land attacks, you fill up your beast gauge, which you can think of as the equivalent of a super combo gauge. And when it's flashing, you can transform into that character's alternate beast form, whether that be a wolf, a bat, a lion, or a whole bunch of others. And while in your beast form, your attacks deal more damage, you constantly recover lost health, you can execute more brutal special attacks, and you can perform a beast drive attack, a super combo that deals a massive amount of damage if it connects. But either way, you immediately lose all of your beast gauge and revert back to your human form, so you really want to make that attack count. Aside from the cool gimmick though, at its core, Bloody Roar 2 is a fast-playing and very fun 3D fighter that's surprisingly easy to get into, featuring a rather simplified control scheme compared to games like Tekken or Virtua Fighter, and allows for both long combo strings and traditional 2D fighter button commands that can also be incorporated into your combos. And each character has a unique playstyle, though they are all fun to play around with. And the more time you spend with this game, the more you realize it features a bit more depth than you may have first thought. This is another one of those games, like Rival Schools and Darkstalkers 3, that my friends and I spent countless hours playing, and never got bored with it. And to this day, I can happily play this game anytime, especially if some multiplayer is on the table. It's endless hours of fun. It's also a pretty damn good looking game for its day, featuring some great character designs and some very smooth animations, though the fighting arenas themselves are just kind of so-so in their designs. But the action is so intense that you probably won't even notice. And yet again, we have a game with an outstanding soundtrack, filled with lots of screaming guitars and catchy hard rock tunes that perfectly complement the frantic action taking place on screen. Indeed, Bloody Roar 2 is a game that, as a fighting game fan, made me very happy I had a PS1 as a kid. Otherwise, games like this, Street Fighter EX, and Rival Schools would have been out of my reach. Anyway, if you haven't tried it yet, don't sleep on Bloody Roar 2. It's a bloody good time. Next up, another game that absolutely dominated my life for a while and was a mainstay of any sleepover, and that is the original Guilty Gear, which, much like Rival Schools, was a game I knew nothing about when I first came across it, but it was a mere $10 in a Walmart bargain bin, and lucky me, it was a rare instance when I actually had enough money to buy a brand new game. And so I bought this one blind, just knowing it was cheap, it had some cool looking characters on the cover, and it was a fighting game. Little did I know it would become one of my favorite fighting games ever and would essentially be the launchpad for Arc System Works to become the fighting game giants we know and love today. Something that set Guilty Gear apart at the time, aside from the great visuals and amazing soundtrack, was the sheer speed and frantic nature of the gameplay. Almost like it was made to be the speed metal version of a fighting game. You start out with a roster of 10 playable characters with a couple more to unlock. And this was, again, one of the wildest cast of characters to ever grace a fighting game at the time. And they each wield a weapon of some type, whether that be a sword, a giant scalpel, or in the case of Milia, her own hair, which seemingly has a mind of its own. This is a 4-button fighter with punch, kick, slash, and heavy slash attacks. And there's a heavy emphasis here on stringing together the most elaborate combos you can, using what's referred to as Gatling. Basically, being able to fire off attacks in rapid succession, quickly and easily chaining one attack into another. Regardless if your opponent is on their feet, in the air, or on their back, if you can reach them, you can keep the combo going. Though you also have commands for countering and recovering from combos to keep things fair. and each character has an assortment of special attacks that can also be incorporated into your combo strings. They even have certain special attacks that can be charged up to become even more devastating. And of course, you have a power gauge that allows you to perform super combos when full. A unique ability in Guilty Gear though is the destruction attacks, where if you can pull them off, your character performs what is essentially a fatality, which not only wins you the round, it wins you the entire match, because, you know, you killed your opponent. It's a super cheap but very entertaining way to win a match. Just be careful not to abuse it or you might lose some friends. Anyway, Guilty Gear is an insanely fun fighting game that plays at lightning speed, and even if you're a button masher, you can still pull off some pretty sick looking combos. And this is another one of those games that made me happy I was a PS1 owner back in the day, because there was literally no other way to play it. And the graphics, the character designs, the stage designs, the amazing art direction, and that absolutely ass-kicking speed metal soundtrack were all just great icing on an otherwise very kick-ass cake. This is a series that carried on for many years and many sequels, but the original Guilty Gear has to be recognized as one of the best 2D fighters of the 32-bit generation. It's just plain awesome. Next up, Namco finally makes an appearance with what I think is the best weapons fighter of this generation, and that is Soul Blade, aka Soul Edge from 1996. And man, did I sink a ton of hours into this game as a kid, both in the arcade and versus modes as well as the Edge Master mode, which functioned as more or less the game's story mode, where you could unlock a ton of different weapons with each character. So in terms of just giving you plenty to do, Soul Blade already has a lot to offer. On top of which, the core gameplay is excellent. Before playing this, I had already played some other weapons fighters on the PS1, most notably Battle Arena Toshinden, which is pretty rough around the edges, and Capcom's Star Gladiator, which is still an awesome game to this day. Even Bushido Blade, which was certainly a very fun and unique fighting game at the time. But none of them could outshine Soul Blade, at least if you ask me. The variety of characters and different fighting styles, combined with the super smooth gameplay that featured a combo system not unlike what I got accustomed to in Tekken 2, made this an instant favorite of mine. And this was one of those games where I really went out of my way to learn how to play each and every character, but they all really do bring something unique to the table, whether that be insane speed and combos, hard-hitting simple attacks, or being just downright weird and maybe a little bit cheap. They're all fun to play with, and this was another perfect game for those long nights when me and my friends would do pretty much nothing but play fighting games. Also, there weren't a ton of fighters at the time that let you get ring-out victories, and that's something that I always loved. Even if you're totally outmatched, you've still got a shot at winning if you can be crafty enough, which never fails to annoy the person you're playing against. But on the whole, the gameplay in Soul Blade is easy to get into, but also offers quite a bit of depth for anyone looking for it. And it's very fun. And the added variety of gameplay modes just gives you more bang for your buck. Also, at the time, these were some pretty impressive graphics. The character animations were smooth, the stages had some fairly elaborate designs, and at a time when opening cinematics were still kind of a new thing in gaming, Soul Blade had one of the absolute best. It's a great introduction to all the characters, and the BGM that plays along with it is excellent. Perfect for getting you hyped up to kick some serious ass, which Namco fighters were always really good at. Finally, there's the sound design, which was odd for a fighter at the time. Most of them had contemporary high-energy music during gameplay, but Soul Blade features like this full orchestral suite, which in hindsight is very fitting for this historical epic of a fighting game. This is another game that would have a ton of sequels that vastly improved the visuals and expanded the character roster and gameplay. But the original Soul Blade is still a classic and well worth going back to today. And it's one of the two Namco fighters that for me defined 3D fighting games in the 32-bit era. Last but certainly not least, a game that comes to many people's minds as soon as they hear the words PlayStation and fighting games, and that is the ever so awesome Tekken 3. And when I talk about games that me and my friends played obsessively like we were training for actual prize fighting tournaments, I'm talking mainly about this game right here. Because for about 3 years or so, this was always a mainstay of any sleepover or gaming session. And even to this day, if I have some friends over, it's always a good time for Tekken 3. And honestly, we really didn't find a replacement for it until Tekken 5 came out. But no matter how much time passes, I just don't think I can ever get tired of good old Tekken 3. The original Tekken was a fine game for its day, and Tekken 2 was a big improvement just a year later. But in 1998, Tekken 3 felt like a whole new game. The roster of characters that you start with includes an amazing mix of playstyles, from absolute powerhouses like Paul to speedsters like Law and Hwoarang, and the introduction of perhaps the cheapest character in fighting game history, Mr. Eddie Gordo, a perfect character for absolutely pissing off your friends. And the final roster tops out at 24 playable characters, including the first appearances of many series favorites, such as Brian Fury, Ling Xiaoyu, and Jin Kazama. And the gameplay in Tekken 3 is a thing of beauty. It's super smooth and intuitive, with each character having a huge assortment of attacks and combos to learn, which at first can be a bit overwhelming, or at least it was for me when I was 12 years old. But once you find a character or characters that you vibe with, you'll be pulling off some sweet combos in no time. Or you can just pick Paul and spam his lunging punch over and over again. Either way, you'll be having a good time, especially if you've got a few friends handy. But if you're flying solo, Tekken 3 is still a ton of fun and gives you a variety of gameplay modes to enjoy, with the most fun perhaps being Tekken Force Mode, which turns the game into a side-scrolling beat-em-up, which, needless to say, is pretty awesome, and I also sunk quite a lot of time into this mode as a kid trying to clear it with every character. So just like Soul Blade, Tekken 3 not only features some phenomenal gameplay, it also has plenty of gameplay modes and unlockables to keep you playing for a good long while. This was also a huge improvement over the previous installment in terms of its visuals. This was an outstanding looking game by the standards of 1998, and again, it featured an epic opening cinematic. Some of the ending cutscenes are a bit cornball though, but that's to be expected of a Tekken game. But the soundtrack on this thing is unforgettable, continuing the legacy of the Tekken series and its killer music. In short, I think this is the best 3D fighter of its generation, which is why it's the 5th best-selling PS1 game of all time. And it just might be the best fighting game period, not just on the PS1, but of the entire 5th generation. But you can let me know down in the comments what your favorite PS1 fighting game is, and when I inevitably make the Sega Saturn counterpart to this video, what games should I include? That's all for now though, so thanks for watching, and stay awesome everybody. I'll catch you on the next one.